Okay, we're live. All right. Thank you very much for joining me today, Alan. So, yeah, there's going to be some people on listen to the podcast who very much know who you are if they are into the Irish bodybuilding scene, but there's going to be some people who are not too familiar with you. So, do you want to give the people a rundown as to who you are and how you got into coaching and the position you're in within the industry now?
Yeah. So thank you for having me, Shane, mate. It's a pleasure to be here. So for me right now, so I'm Alan, obviously. I am the owner and founder of AKA Method Coaching and AKA HQ Gym. So for me now, 2025, I've been in the coaching game since 2008 is when I pretty much started. So I finished school in 2007. Started working for free. The country was in a recession. Started working for free in City West Gym. Then I moved to another gym closer to home in Kildare. Again, working for free because nobody would hire me. And at the same time then, obviously just finished school, not a clue what I was doing. But working for free here, also having a part-time job to obviously pay for uni. So for me then was a case of I was working in a German production factory at night. And then that was obviously feeding back into what I needed to get through obviously college. So my formal academia is in sports nutrition and exercise physiology, and my postgrad then is in nutrition.
Nice.
So for me then, at that point, I always was immersed around I wouldn't say bodybuilding, but immersed around that sort of lifestyle of, my dad was a little bit of a gym rat, and my uncles were, and I would have been in like the Hercules gym at a young age in Dublin. You probably know it being my parent, yeah. So I would have spent a lot of time there when I was younger, with my dad, with my godfather, etc. Then from there, that sort of stemmed what I wanted to do. But anytime I brought it to anybody when I was in school, even before we get to that point, it was always shot down that there's like no money in this game, and obviously online coaching, etc., wasn't a thing then, right? And personal training was very much a luxury. So it was a very difficult time in the industry, or to break into the industry, and different as to where it is now in terms of, the likes of this and other platforms where there's knowledge being given in abundance.
Yeah.
Where back then, as you might remember, it simply wasn't. It was very, very culty, and you're left to fend for yourself. So everything that I'd done then through courses, especially like formal academia, was more so based around like endurance. There's nothing, as you know, but it wasn't much that was sort of formulating around bodybuilding, physique development. So it was really getting a thorough understanding of nutritional science and physiology, and then being able to interpret that as into what I wanted to do and bringing it into how I coach from a physique perspective. So throughout, obviously, my formal academia, I was on the floor coaching. Eventually got a part-time position where I was actually going to get paid. It took 6 months, believe it or not, for me to actually get paid. I was being paid buttons. But I knew at that point I've got my foot in the door and I could build up a clientele base. So I started like doing classes and so talking to people there, fixing things, so on and so forth. And ended up, before I knew it, within 6-7 months, being pretty full with one-to-one coaching. Then from there, from the one-to-one coaching side of things on the floor, which I absolutely loved them years. I've done that then for 9 years of being pretty much at capacity, just sharpening my tools, implementing what I was learning. Because aside, like yourself, aside from formal academia, I was non-stop jumped into other courses. Like I travelled over and done literally every polycon course, Great Cook, RTS, a lot. Anytime I finished the course, I just was worried about what I didn't know, and I just jumped back in, do another one. And it was like almost like chain smoking courses after courses. Now some of it I wasted a lot of money on, but obviously, what I got out of it then was a thorough understanding as to what way I wanted to go, developing my athletes and how I wanted to build a brand and so on and so forth. Long story short, after like 9 years or so, maybe close to 10 of doing one-to-one coaching, then I start building up a little bit more of an online presence, start getting inquiries from athletes outside of Ireland. Then from there, then it's really just sort of taken off, mate. It doesn't feel any different to me. I still feel the exact same as what I did when I was, 18, 19, starting this, and I'm 34 now, almost 35, getting very old at the moment. So, but I still have that same mindset. I still feel like it's the same thing. So it's just been over time, just organically, really just worrying and focusing on what I didn't know, trying to get a better understanding of it, and then just exploring that and feeding it back into my athletes. That's basically brought me obviously here to today.
Yeah, I think it's a sign of a like a great coach, isn't it? It's like the person who is like forever a student. Like as you said there, when you're finished your course, you're like, geez, there's a lot here I don't know. How can I kind of feed that like kind of that need
Wasted.
again? Because there is so much to learn. Like the amount of times you need to like repeat learning about a topic until it like very much sticks. Like the amount of times I would have like went through sort of biomechanics stuff, or even like something like just learning how a muscle contracts. You know, the amount of time I had to like read that process before it actually kind of like stuck and made sense of my brain. And as well, kind of what you're saying in regards to like when we were kind of getting into it and there wasn't much information. I actually think that time, that period of like, history is actually probably better than what we have now because there's too much information now, right? I think back then, because there was so little information, it gave people only limited options to choose from and pick from and stick to. Whereas like now, because there's so many different things coming out like almost every single week, like, follow somebody like Mena Hanselman's and you'll just be changing your program and your nutrition practice like every other week. Whereas like it just doesn't give people enough time to stick, and it's like information overload is like worse than like the having a dearth of information. So
Especially because at this point in time, and obviously, if we bring ourselves back to where we were and we implement it now in 2024, 2025, because there's so much information, but you don't know yet what you don't know, right? So you're ignorant to what is actually right. And I think back, it sounds so old, say back in the day, you were sort of, well, you were way more engulfed around the basics. And then I feel like it's starting to change a little bit back towards it is now, where it was now. But there's been a large segment of time in which the basics were almost shunned upon. And there's overcomplication, over confusion, and physiques inherently have gone backwards. Because of this, especially the younger generation now, where obviously as a gym owner, I get to see people outside of just obviously my athletes, and it's always eye-opening to me now to see what they're not doing. We have 90 machines in the gym. They could all be full, but there's no one in the rack.
yeah,
There's no one pulling from the floor. There's no one doing pull-ups. For me, I'm like, you're missing the forest for the trees. You're missing the basics. There's the way I look at things is that there's a time for aggression in lift and there's a time for accuracy in a lift, and that has to be merged into that mesocycle. And if we're going to bring a physique forward, I think that we've seen, because of obviously influences, etc. I don't want to just point the finger at influences, but even academics that have really latched on to, emerging research, etc. But they're getting a valuable point across. It's how it's been interpreted that, okay, well, that's all I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I feel that's where the issue is.
Yeah, I also think as well there's the fact that many people who are, I don't know, maybe they're putting forth a certain exercise like this is like the best lat movement or something like this. We're also kind of discounting the fact that like the person who's got to that physique and has that platform, they probably did a lot of other stuff leading it to build that physique than that, right? A big thing that people always say is they'll mention like deadlifts don't build your back or whatever, that, right? But like anybody who's tried to build a decent deadlift also does a lot of back work to support that, and I guess like the back is not just like one muscle group, right? Like you can see somebody who's like done a lot of like heavy hinging across the years, they have like that like density, right? Because people are, I think when they're thinking about changing body composition or improving like their physique, they think too much about the superficial muscle of the back. Like, they think about like, okay, the lats, the traps, the things I can see, but like if something's like denser underneath, like the likes of the erectors, the rhomboids, all pushing that out, that's what makes the back look meatier, right? So I think there is a kind of a obsession with the things that you can see and not thinking about the things that you can't see.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Yeah, especially as you diet down, that's where that becomes really prominent. I feel like some people don't have the functional competency to squat or deadlift, but there's a million other ways for us to be able to incorporate aspects of that into a meso. And I feel that a lot of the people that are almost like passionate about not doing it, for me, and it's probably not the correct thing to say, but I feel like they lack a work ethic. They don't want to have that feeling of, pulling from the floor underneath a heavy squat. And I think that's, if we scraped it all back, that's the fundamental problem here, is that they don't want to feel them feels.
Yeah.
Because when you lie down and you've seen it, you've competed, and you have had athletes, there's a certain look when you're getting properly conditioned. You can see who has substance and depth to their physique. Now, I'm not saying that everybody must deadlift or everybody must do anything, but over the years you can see, especially those that are at the top level, be it amateurs, pros, etc.
Yeah, there is a lot of value to just being able to master movement. As an athlete, like as a bodybuilder, right? Like, I guess, like, now there is so many gyms like in Ireland that have like really good equipment, like your gym, relative to what there was a few years ago. And I think more people are in tune with what's a good machine, what's not a good machine, or like, what are like standout pieces across different brands and stuff like that. But there's going to be a time and place that like could happen, like God forbid another lockdown ever happened again. But if all you're stuck with is a barbell and a rack and a few dumbbells, how do you make it work?
The funny thing is that everyone made it work when that godforsaken time happened. So we start to see, I started to see within my own client base, guys that said that they couldn't start squatting big numbers. Guys that said they didn't enjoy deadlifting, now love deadlifting. And that was the catalyst for everything. It was forced, you had no choice. That's where my thought process probably changed, as to let's look underneath and deeper as to why someone doesn't want to do it. Like, maybe it's not that they haven't got the functional competency or the skill set to do it. It's that they're not willing to learn and they're not willing to get to that point of exertion.
Yeah, because again, the training with I guess free weights in general is like, I'm not a free weights versus machine guy, but like I see the value in both of them. But there is definitely a higher level of intensity or higher level of like grit that you need to bring to when you're doing like something hard with a barbell. But I don't want to get too off topic here, right? Because I guess the kind of main thing I wanted to get you onto the podcast was to talk about, talking about bodybuilding preps, kind of set one up, and everything that kind of goes alongside that. And naturally enough, the training is a kind of big component of that. And as you mentioned, like, there's going to be certain differences that you can see somebody's physique if they're maybe a little bit too like exclusive with their movement selection versus somebody who's more inclusive and has a kind of broader kind of exercise catalog, you could say. But I wanted to ask you, right, when somebody is looking to start a prep with you or looking to get into bodybuilding, like, what have you seen over the years to be things that make for a successful bodybuilding candidate, like somebody who do really, really well from prep and thrive?
From a characteristics perspective?
Yeah, characteristics. Naturally, they have to have some muscle, I guess, but like...
Absolutely. So, like, if we're talking about it as in an athlete, a potential athlete has inquired for coaching, and my first sort of objective feelings towards them when I look at them and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
So, for me, like, obviously we know, look, bodybuilding at the higher echelon is going to be dictated highly by genetics. Now, that's not to say that, with okay genetics, you can't have a phenomenal mindset and really over succeed and make it all the way to the top. You absolutely can. We've seen that time and time again. But there has to be an element of genetics there, right? So we need to be very aware of that at the start so that we can manage athlete expectations. So when an athlete comes in, the first thing for me that I look at is actually not just their pictures. It's not the first thing really isn't, right, I'm going to assess your visuals first. I want to speak to the individual. I want to get to know the individual first. I want to get an understanding as to who they are, what they're about, what they want to do. Obviously listen to them as they, will tell me a little bit about their life, tell me about what they want to do, so on and so forth, within obviously the bodybuilding sphere. Then I'll assess their pictures. So I've now got what I need from and I'll go a little bit deeper into the questions and stuff in a second, but I've now got what I need from them in the retrospect to their expectations and so on and so forth. But then I'll obviously look at the visuals, and I can say within 5 seconds of seeing a physique if they have what it takes to match their expectations or do well. Because at the point in which I'm in now, and I'm blessed to say that, but there's a lot of athletes that will inquire and, straight away, IFBB Pro. They either don't have it or they don't know it. We touched on it earlier on, they don't know what they don't know yet. So they don't actually know what's outside of Ireland. They haven't yet proved themselves actually in Ireland. So it's really just sitting down and having a conversation with them. And I'd be very assertive and sort of, I guess we could say blunt, but in a calm manner, that I would just say to them, look, this is the better route for you. Let's go down this route. If it's a lesser route because of X, and then we progress from there. Now, when I'm talking about genetics, I'm not just talking about someone that's inquired and they currently don't have the muscle mass, because muscle mass is easy to accrue over time, right? It's more looking at things from a structural perspective. And that'll probably lead me into the questions that I will ask, so that will feed into that. When an athlete comes on board, and I spoke about this a while ago, but asking the right questions is so important. So we want to know, obviously, their federation. We want to know their category. We want to know if they've competed before, their previous feedback from the head judge. I want to see their previous stage photos, but more important to their previous stage photos is going to be the leanest that they've been. So right at the end of peak weeks before they've got tanned or before any potential manipulations were made. So at your leanest point during your peak prior to getting tanned, I want to see that. I want to see visuals during your peak in which you were carb loading, etc. So that starts to sort of input data into my brain then as to, right, well, this is what's happened, this is what went right, this is potentially what went wrong, etc. Then once I have that, then we're obviously, as I touched on a second ago, we're looking at the current goals as to what their expectations are. Like, is it a win a PCA show? Is it just to compete because it's been a lifelong goal and it's, you're on your own journey and you've lost a ton of body fat and you just want to cap this off so you can say to your kids in a few years that I did that, and I respect that fully. But that's where really just managing the individual and their expectations, because as you know, Shane, that can go out of control really, really quickly. And we have a lot of coaches, unfortunately, that will gaslight and they won't be probably fully honest with what the capabilities are of the athlete, and the athlete is left upset because that's not managed and clear at the start. So all of this information here for me is starting to imprint then as to what way the roadmap will be. So then we're looking at the current environment. So we're looking at like home life, work, stress life, so we can get an idea, say, on cortisol levels, sleep efficacy. Then obviously from a nutritional perspective, I'll be looking at food intolerances and digestive issues. What is your current diet setup? What was your current diet setup in your previous prep if you've competed? Did you have any SIBO, IBS, anything like that, particularly if it's a female coming into prep? So really just sort of feeding all that information back now from a nutritional perspective. And then we touched on the training setup. So what are you currently training? What days can you currently train? What gym are you training and what do you like training? And then assessing their physique from both a functional competency perspective, but also physically structure. Well, where are you lacking? And that can feed back into feedback from previous shows. And if they have competed before, and where their expectations lie as to where they want to succeed in the next show, be it NPC, so on and so forth, natural, enhanced, etc. Then obviously you touched on natural and enhanced. We'd be looking at, especially if assisted, previous blood work up until now. So I try to get as much blood work from an athlete coming on board as possible. So maybe their last 3 blood work, so that I can see then, and again, imprinting data into my side of things as to, right, well, this is where he or she's blood was a little bit skewed. This is what they were currently running then. This is what they're doing here. This is what wasn't done previously. And then that feeds back into me, because again, we can look at genetics from a multitude of ranges. We can look at genetics as muscle mass. We can look at genetics from a fat loss cap. Like some people can just get desert dry. But we also have to look at genetics in terms of drug clearance and pharmacokinetics. So some individuals and the best, and this is, gospel, the best in this industry don't take a hell of a lot of steroids. They just clear them and partition them a hell of a lot better than normal individuals. And that's where the dangers lie, because there's steroids and physique enhancement drugs, but the issue is the individual, because they're just more sure. If I'm this size and I'm taking this, and he's that size, surely he's taking double. So I'll take double.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question, because it's that sort of attitude as to, when I bury my head in the sand, and if I don't know, it doesn't matter, right? It's the worst attitude ever, but unfortunately I see it so often when new athletes coming on board. And it's really sad for me to say then that some of the athletes are coming on board. And I'm never one to bash or badmouth any of their coaching brands, coaches, etc. But the lack of ethics and the lack of care in terms of frequent blood work It's just mind-boggling to me that, you can let this, male or female athlete go so long without bloods, and everything you're doing then is guesswork. I've had individuals that have came to me that been crying on the other side of a Zoom call, and they have females that are showing severe signs of virilization, not knowing. And look, there's two sides to this.
Yeah.
There's no one put a gun to your head either. But at the same time, not knowing what they didn't know, having full trust in who was coaching them, but they never got blood work done. They never done anything in the retrospect to mitigate against any of this. There was never, honest chat between a rapport between the coach and the athlete. And now, obviously, it's brought to me, and this individual then wants to compete in, X amount if it's at end of the year. But that again, we tie into the roadmap and managing expectations and whatnot. That might have to be another year down the line then, because we have to get things right. And it's not just females. I just use that as an example, but we're looking at males and obviously just having blood work in the bin, and it's a sad situation. But obviously, I'm sure you're very aware, Shane. It's what's happening now, and Instagram in particular, TikTok as well, have become platforms to speak openly and freely and almost like a badge of honor about PED usage. Truth be told, I almost fell into that from the aspects of I can give education here, until I realized that if I don't communicate this information super well, and if there's anything that can be led to interpretation, this is going to be someone saying, well, Alan, or AKA Method, has now said that you can do X, Y, Z. And that's why I pulled back on all of that, because, it's like that saying, you give an inch, they take a mile, right? Especially when something they believe will take them closer to their goal. That's where I feel like I'm scary. And I know I've just completely digressed.
I'm here for it. No.
All of this is sort of what I take into consideration when I'm on board an athlete.
Yeah, no, I'm here for the tangent, man, because I think that is something that does need to be spoken about more. I guess like in Ireland, there's limited platforms for people to really kind of speak about this type of thing. I know it's a lot more common in like English bodybuilding podcasts, like American bodybuilding podcasts, because I guess they're generally the birthplaces of a lot of these kind of like ideas and everything. But yeah, the big kind of thing with like the more awareness around PEDs, like obviously it's great that there is more awareness now, but of course, as you said, it's always information that can be kind of taken, with the wrong kind of approach, right? It's kind of the same, like it's the same at a riskier level with like nutrition, right? Like, you can learn about how to track macros and how to eat healthily, but then you could also bring that to the point of developing something like bulimia, anorexia, orthorexia, all these different kind of eating disorders, fear around like eating specific foods and everything. But then you put it at the level of PEDs, things that are actually going to change like the chemistry within your body, that can change like, how your kind of brain is working. And then as well, like there's also the big effects of like a lot of people who maybe take them and misapply them. They do a cycle, they get some bad effects, they go off them, they kind of go through that kind of negative cycle of they go off, they go cold turkey, they have all the kind of depressive effects that come alongside that, and then they're kind of caught in this cycle of going on, off, on, off, on, off. And a lot of people who I talk to who've fallen into that cycle, they end up just not going to the gym and not training, because like they feel like that's the only way to do it. And yeah, like it's not a free lunch, as you said, with the likes of the top guys, IFBB pros, who are just like, they have the genetics to be able to handle like a lower dose than other people may need. And then it's the same with like that guy couldn't be natural, he must be taking drugs, and then he says he's on drugs, and it's like, I'm only taking 200 milligrams of test a week. You must be taking more than 200 milligrams of test. There's no way I'm taking 200 milligrams that I don't look anything like that. And it assumes that it's a linear kind of thing, right? It assumes that I take 200 milligrams of test, I get 200 milligrams of test worth of results. I take 1,000 milligrams, I'm going to get 5 times the result. But like, again, you're talking about something that has other interactions within the body, right? And then you add in more things, more pharmacy. If you added more tests, well, you could be one of those people who all of a sudden you're aromatized into more estrogen, and then you're fucked, and then you take AI, and then you're even more fucked.
And that's, if we chat today around sort of peak weeks and so on and so forth, that is an aspect to consider, as you move to that sort of back end of prep, and as you enter into your peak week. And this is why, look, this one of the first things that was embedded in me when studying nutrition was, one, we do no harm, and two, test don't guess. And these are just sort of forgotten philosophies within the industry right now, unfortunately. And outside of PDs, then there's this whole absolute emergence and misunderstood emergence of SARM use, which is a whole other kettle of fish. You've got guys that are running high levels of exposure from an AR perspective, and then levels of exposure from a SARM perspective. And like, mate, if you're doing this to yourself and you're doing this to your clients, and you're basing what you're doing on your clients, what you're doing to yourself, with no formal knowledge around human physiology or pharmacokinetics, and to be honest, there's just a lack of duty of care. But then it is slowly, destroying things.
Yeah.
For the athletes and plus then the industry. And that's not me speaking negative. It's just obviously with being in the trenches, it's just something that I see. And look, for every bad example, I can give you multiple good examples from coaches that are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. And look, you know, Shane, it's not hard to see, right? You can just have a gander through different coaching pages, and you know who's doing what and who's not, right? Mm-hmm. So it's who's actually doing their job properly and who's just smoking mirrors for Instagram.
Yeah, I guess the thing with the SARMs is kind of like it's kind of like the pro hormones, like, you know, like 10, 15 years ago. It's the exact same kind of thing, and I think it's also where science becomes misapplied and misinterpreted with people running away with like mechanisms, because like you can find a mechanism for like any drug to have like some type of positive interaction with your body, but if you are completely like ignoring all of the potential negative downsides, and then as well you're using just mechanistic kind of studies or mechanistic reasoning and completely kind of discounting the fact that there probably is like no human trials for a lot of these things, you know? Yeah, or it's not even applied in the context of somebody looking to build muscle.
Yeah, it's just search until you see the answer that you want.
Confirmation bias.
Exactly, confirmation bias. So unfortunate, it is what it is.
So I guess like obviously that's everything you're kind of getting like before you kind of have somebody kind of decide that, okay, all right, you're going to be good to kind of get up on stage at some point, whether that's next year or the next few years, we can have everything that we need. So I guess like just before we kind of enter into a contest prep cycle, like what are the absolute necessities for like foundational habits or practice that you want to place just before you start the prep so that you can just ensure that everything runs smoothly?
So before we actually start the fat loss side of prep.
Yeah. So anything that you're like talking about, like the last few months of the off season in regards to like transitioning away from that.
Yeah. So obviously it goes without saying, we want to ensure that you've accrued enough tissue, right? Independent to obviously your category that you're going to be competing in and plus the foundation. So, but in order to accrue enough tissue, well then we will have needed to have, our sleep markers in place. We'll need to have, habitual behavior patterns as it pertains to our nutrition, because obviously we're fueling obviously tissue accrual. And our training needs to be consistent and progressive. I touched on it a second ago from an environmental perspective. Everything needs to be in line, because this is something that, it can be, we have it in line at the start and we have it in line for the majority of prep, and then life happens sometimes, right? And life can throw you a lemon, and then the wheels can fall off at home or in home life, or work situation, etc., right before you start prep. And for me, that then there is, we have to have an honest conversation here. Yes, you've accrued the tissue that I need. Yes, our cornerstones, our sleep and our hydration, everything that's going to play a role in obviously tissue accrual is on point. But a core fundamental aspect here is out. And now, we have a question mark. We have a level of potential inconsistency. We have a level of high potential of stress. That means it's going to feed into catecholamines in the blood. That's going to affect inflammatory markers and so on and so forth. So, and as you know, when shit hits the fan, then at the latter end of prep is when that actually becomes worse and heightened, right? So that for me then is something that we have to clearly watch out for. So if we're looking at, right, has he or she accrued enough tissue? They should have done, because it's roadmapped with expectations. We're not just in an infinitive surplus. We're going, obviously, at phase 1. We'll clean up, we'll reset, we'll improve insulin resistance, we'll decrease inflammatory markers, we'll go phase 2. And we'll repeat that based off what I see at the start until, I could say to you at the start, it's going to be 12 months, 16 months, 2 years. And it's reverse engineered back. So all of these phases are pre-planned in, and obviously there's room for moving as life happens, and it's dynamic in that nature. But point being is that we'll have multiple phases there, so that there's no other choice or chance that you cannot have enough tissue at this point. If I've done my job right and you've done your job right, but realistically, if you haven't done your job right and I've kept pushing, then I haven't done my job right. So it's a case here of by the time you get to there, I've given you no choice but to have that tissue. So then it's looking at just making sure that the support network at home is there, that everything is calm, everything is situated, financially, that you're ready for your prep. If this is an individual who is at the higher level from an amateur perspective and it's going to do, a regional and then go qualify abroad, then for pro qualifiers, we have travel expenses, you have female different bikinis, you've got their hair, their makeup, you have lads with different togs, training shorts, so on and so forth. All of these things have to be considered because pro qualifiers are not cheap. They range from, really not, they range from like just to enter the show, like €220 to €350, depending on the show. And that's not including then your NPC membership, which is, I think, is another $100. And that's not including, obviously, your tanning, which is another 150, anywhere from 100 to €150. That's not including if you're female, your makeup, your hair, everything else on top of that. Everything. So, it really does accumulate. If you're doing a few shows, in a season, outside of the obvious, your plane ticket, your hotel, your transportation from hotel to venues for registration and all this stuff, it all elevates. So, a decent chunk of financial investment outside of the food, the supplements, the potential drug use, etc. Outside of all that, just at the end part, you've got an even higher expense. Yeah. That has to be considered and thoroughly explained to the athlete. And I would have that done long before prep starts, but it's a reminder then as prep starts that, right, we good. This is what's happening here. We're starting prep here now. As we come into autumn, September, end of September, October, are you going to be okay here? Have you been managing things on the side to make sure that you can do X, Y, Z? Again, I try to encourage that as we're going through that sort of back end of the off season to make sure that that's a positive conversation as opposed to them saying, yeah, not really, it's going to be expensive, but sure, look, we'll figure it out when we get there. No, because cortisol through the roof, and it's, for me, that's like, there's a question mark now on your buy-in, and so, maybe you don't fully believe in your ability to do the work and get there, because I won't miss my side. So again, if you're with me, you trust me. So, that for me is always a question mark, and thankfully it's not something that's common, but really just looking at that. So we're looking at tissue, we're looking at home life, we're looking at work life, stress, financially. And then, of course, making sure as we go through that pre-prep phase, again, I touch on, obviously assisted athletes for this, but making sure that blood work is in an applicable position. Maybe your analysis is done. If they've had 2 years of consistent exposure, I'd like to get an echo done and make sure that everything is where we need things to be, and just so that we can tick that box and you can go into your prep then with a.
Yeah, I think the stability kind of point is super important, right? Like both like with the home life, work life, the financial side of things, because as you mentioned, those costs rack up quite a bit. Like I did my first prep there in 2022, and I did 6 shows, like across like the 8-week like window or something like that. And like they were between Ireland, the UK to LA, and it wasn't cheap. Like I spent a lot of money, and there wasn't thankfully I didn't have anything else planned other than prep, and I was obviously still able to pay my rent and still able to pay everything else. But like, God, if you are not in a position where you have like a stable kind of income or stable work life, or you don't even have like a kind of like a stable employment, like it's kind of difficult to commit to a prep.
Yeah, it changes everything, and it's really, look, thankfully it's not been something that's happened much now. I have the conversation for every athlete, but thankfully most times it's just, no, I have everything squared off. I know what's doing. You've explained this. We're both on the same hymn sheet here. But it is an awful situation when you have an athlete that's done the work and they look phenomenal and their body is responsive and everything is in a great position to start. But at the last part of the off season, they've been let go.
Yeah.
Or God forbid, there's been a health emergency within the family that's going to take obviously financial commitment there. Whatever it may be, the engine of the car blew up, etc. That expenditure that they had saved is now gone. And for me, that's one of the worst conversations that we can have, because I feel like it's really important for your coach to have that code of ethics to be able to just put your arm around the athlete and just say, look, it's okay. You know, the stage's not going anywhere, and you need to look after what's a priority here. Bodybuilding, you know, as an amateur, it's your sport, it's your hobby, but like this is your life.
Yeah.
So we can compete, we can move the goalposts. You're already ready. We can do a mini cut down and we can rebound. We can just add in an extra phase. So it's really having that conversation. But no matter how you explain the conversation, it's always you can see it in them, right? They're always just disheartened. So for me, it's a really important aspect to have that conversation. And I only learned it through trial and error, because it's actually something that I never did at the start of my career as a prep coach until I got hit with it. And I was like, Jesus, how have I overlooked this side of things? I've been so, you know, engulfed in the science and the data collection and the coaching side of things that I forgot about the individual and I forgot about the side of bodybuilding that, you know, we have to control. And I learned the hard way then with one of my best clients not being able to travel over to a show in Spain because he didn't have the money to do it. And then, but obviously you understand then, and it's molded me into a better coach or better man management as a coach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're not just thinking about like as you said, like the diet and the training. You're thinking about like the actual kind of human side of the process, like the practical side of the process, right? Because like you can have all the fucking willpower in the world and all the discipline and the ability to train hard and like, you know, stick to your diet, but geez, if you don't have the means, if you don't have the kind of the things in the background that's kind of supporting that goal, it's very difficult to get there in the context of your client not being able to kind of travel to a show. And you know, it's obviously very, very disheartening. But even then, as a coach, it does take a lot of like I guess it takes a lot of maturity to be able to say, like, you know, I've prepped this guy to be in amazing condition. It's really annoying that he can't, like, he's scraping by. And he has to decide between, like, you know, getting his car fixed or coming to the show. It's like, can you just leave the car there? Like, you know, like the car, you don't even need the car when you're over there in Spain. You know, so that's definitely something that I'm sure that just comes with time, because kind of talking about what we said earlier in regards to some kind of poor coaching that goes on in the industry. Like there are people who put their business and their kind of I guess not prestige, but like them getting the result to put on their Instagram over the person there. And I'm sure it happens all the time when it does come to these financial things or stability things, like, you know, whether that's somebody's lacking support with their family, their partner, and, you know, the coach's like, oh, I'm the only support you need. Sure, have it.
We see that you know, the coach wants to take all of the credit and it has done all of the magic. But coaching is, as you know, it's a collaboration. It's not a dictatorship. So for me personally, as to how I like to coach, is just in the background, behind my clients, just let my clients, you know, have the limelight there because they do the work, right? And why I don't do a hell of a lot of stuff like this, because I just am happiest when I'm, you know, in the background doing what I need to do and just coaching every hour of the day. That's where I'm happy. So I don't actually, social media and stuff I struggle with because I don't like to be that it's just not in my character to be that outspoken and this and that and this, but I just love coaching and I love prep coaching, I love physique development, and I'd rather sort of be in the background and doing my thing and making sure my clients are good. And that's
yeah. I would like kind of be the same in the sense that, like, I when I'm trying to make a coaching post, I'm like, you know, trying to promote my business and I'm talking about, like, you know, how a client achieved the result, and like you kind of feel a little bit kind of like disingenuous if you're like overplaying your part, right? I wrote the plan and they did the plan, they did everything that like led them to the result. I literally just like crunched the numbers and like wrote the exercises on their sheet, right? Like ultimately it is about like the person doing it. Like we're obviously there to support and kind of guide and everything, but yeah, I do think sometimes coaches can get a little bit more like, I am, like, you know, I'm the one who's dictated this entire process, and you know, I'm the kind of biggest player, when we're not really. We're a supporting character. You know, they're the main character in the goal.
And the thing is that most of the coaches that I like that are actually the least qualified coaches. It's like, well, you know, you haven't even done your part in terms of actually educating. So like, shit, if I'm in a bad room, I might just call you out. No, yeah, not before I digress anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to kind of touch on, I guess, and it kind of just like follows on from that, like what would be your kind of ideal scenario in regards to somebody's position before they start prep? Like, there's going to be, I guess, varying timelines for people to prep within. Some people can prep like within the 12 to 16 week mark. But like, what's the kind of ideal timeline for you between somebody kind of starting prep to getting on stage?
I always like to go on the longer side of
Yeah.
things. So, for me, I like, especially for a natural,
Yeah.
like to go between that sort of, you know, 19 to 22 week mark. I like to go longer with that
Mm-hmm.
so that we can make sure that, you know, we're doing everything in our power to be able to preserve tissue. It's not a case that we're searching for fat loss at the back end of prep, because tools, as you know, are limited. But even with the assisted side of things, I do prefer to go longer. Usually it's around the 19-week mark. Now, I do have some individuals that are really unique in the retrospect that they do well actually with like an 8 to 10 week prep, and they actually do better. Whereas when it's extended out, it's something that their mind plays tricks on them, and it ends up just being less efficacious. So it really is interdependent. But if for me, I do like the longer side of things that we can incorporate. But when we take the main key player and we handle that sort of right. We are given enough time here to be legit conditioned, because as you'll know, across all federations, across all categories, the condition marker has moved forward over here, and we've seen each federation, and particularly in the MP, evolve. Bikini evolved to the extent that now they've brought in obviously fit model. We look at wellness now has gone to a point in which, you know, it's a very, very, very unique look. And we look at men's physique that have, you know, 2x in size over the last 5-6 years, amateurs and pros. Classic the same. We're looking at in the pro ranks, you know, it's bigger and bigger. We're looking at the amateur ranks. Again, in the open classes, it's just bigger, and it's bigger with more condition, and having that time frame is important for me as a coach, because we can then implement strategies, and we can leave, you know, buffer room to be like, right, well, look, if we want to have a diet break here, or we can be inclusive of a refeed here. Now, I'll put it into the roadmap as to so that they can have a visual aspect, but you know, we can't just template obviously of that. So everything's done by eye and interpretation of data. So that could get moved forward, that could get moved back. But point being is that the roadmap, and I think rule number one is give enough time, so that you're not searching for fat loss towards the back end of prep.
Yeah, I think going a little bit harder at the start at least just gives you more time to course correct versus what a lot of people do when they are maybe not getting to the stage and the kind of condition they want is they'll go too slow and they're kind of too hesitant to make some changes early on, and the result they are essentially, as I said, chasing fat loss towards the end. And what happens at that point, could be already 10 weeks into prep, you're already getting a little bit fatigued from the diet, and then you have to dig a lot harder, and as well you have the stress of will I be ready in time, which is just not a good place to be.
With prep, I always see prep as like split in two. I don't know if you've ever looked at it in this way, but if we look at, let's say, just for an average, we say 16-week prep, the first 8 weeks of prep are more psychologically demanding. And then the second, the last 8 weeks of prep is more physically demanding, where obviously your condition is coming in more at general level of systemic fatigue is high. But psychologically, you see it in the mirror.
Yeah.
There's new detail. You're seeing the changes. So what you have to comprehend against then is, or combat against then, is the physical demands. But at the start, really managing the individual is important, because you're going from, you know, a pre-prep phase or a primer phase, bridging from obviously your off season. So as we get then into that section of prep, and that's actually why I put that primer in to try and mitigate against this. Yes, so as we're merging then from the primer phase into the prep phase, you know, there could be a manipulation on drug use, insulin use, so on and so forth. So we're going to start seeing inflammation drop down. That can be perceived then by the individual as its size. So then you're getting to a point where you're caught between the dreaded two Fs, fat and flat. You know, you start to flatten out, but body fat isn't changing it can only change at a certain pace. So you're getting and you're managing that sort of side of things, that you're reassuring that this is what we need to do to get to this point. As we get to this point, then it's more physical demand, because the look is there and you start to see it. But I feel like more athletes struggle at the start. They go through like the sweet spot in the middle, and then at the end is then the physical demands, is how I look at it.
What type of adjustment do you make out the gate when you are kind of starting somebody off for the fat loss? Do you make it kind of 10% reduction in calories, 20% reduction, or how do you go with that?
Yeah.
And then like adding in things like cardio and stuff?
Yeah, so I'm a big advocate of cardio in the off season. Cardio is never something that I take out for mitochondrial health. They're really important, and then we're looking at just digestive health, etc. So cardio is always going to be a staple there, and that they're habitually used to that anyway. But then merging from off season into that primer phase, sort of pre-prep, if you will. What I look at is I go softer. I might go 8 to 12% drop, and then I'll just hold there, and I'll let the body just steadily get a little bit less inflamed, work up a little bit of hunger. In comparison to, look, if food isn't the burden of your life at the end of an off season, you haven't maximized everything, right? Because my goal as a coach is to maximize physique development. It's not just to move it forward; it's to get the maximum output. So it's tapering that down, taking a little bit of pressure off the GI, and improving insulin sensitivity a little bit, which, look, we monitor anyway, obviously in the off season, particularly if there's different drugs in use. But at the start, then I don't actually really ever start anybody on prep, and we're talking about assisted athletes here, but I don't start anyone on prep in super physiological ranges. So we've gone from our off season, we have a gap here where we'll start the prime, as I just said there. We can call that prep anyway, right? But it's sort of an excess period in which we just buffer. At that point, then I've pulled everything back down into physiological range, so back onto TRT, etc. So almost like a clearance phase. I hate the term health phase because you should never be that detrimentally unhealthy. So we'll move back down into a clearance phase and then start transitioning into prep. So it might even be a few weeks into prep before AAS is actually brought back in and reintroduced. And at that point, then, you'll hear me always say healthy is responsive. So we've got a point of health here in which then we can merge into prep, because obviously as prep moves and as it gets closer, you start bringing in, PDs that are going to be a little bit more neurally toxic, like your 19 Norse and Tremolone, etc. Bringing in 17C alpha alkylated drugs, so your orals, your Anavar, Winstrol, etc., etc. So, this all has to be considered towards the back end of prep, that, right, well, as it pertains to health, this is where it's at it's your highest risk. And some people I've heard argue that no, off season's at the highest risk, usage being at its highest, but it's not, because you shouldn't be using orals, etc. in the back end of an off season. So for me, at the start of prep, it's taking that small adjustment in calories, letting the body settle down a little bit, letting that natural drop. So, because, look, if you plummet it, you're going to drop very fucking quick. If you're working with lifestyle clients, you will see it, 4 weeks in and they've dumped like 6 kilos. Yeah. It's like right the weight, where it's just not all fat loss, right? So we want to just taper things down, steady the ship, steady the individual, have the bloods where we want it, and then start strategically moving through prep where everything is predictable. Predictability, I'm sure my clients are absolutely sick of me saying it. Predictability is key for everything that I do.
Yeah, it provides a lot of certainty. If you're getting like a almost fixed rate of loss per week, and I guess that kind of, it's really important for the individual is actually doing the thing to be kind of trying to keep as much kind of consistent as possible. But I guess that's like the expectation when you are kind of getting into a bodybuilding prep, isn't it? It's like, it's not somebody in the kind of general population looking to diet for a holiday who, like, you can have a bit of an increased level of flexibility, because nobody really cares if you have 4 or 6 abs out on the side of the pool. But when you're getting into stage condition, there's like a higher level of, okay, we need to be kind of neurotic here. Like, it's important to be neurotic, especially as a coach who's like reviewing the data, and what we see is all there is. What we kind of look at the sheet, we're just assuming, okay, that's it. That's completely honest. This is exactly what they're doing, and now we can make adjustments based off that. I was gonna kind of ask then, I guess, like with that then, so like with the data that you get with the person who's implementing this plan, they're kind of going through the prep, like, how do you troubleshoot the process? So say, for example, a client is like, a couple weeks into prep, and based off the current level of calories, based off the current level of expenditure, they're kind of hitting a little bit of a wall with the kind of fat loss. How do you decide between, okay, the move here is to either wait another week. Is the move here to kind of go with maybe kind of reducing some fatigue? Maybe they need a refeed, or maybe this person just needs to push harder, and maybe we need to make a drop. Like, because there's three different kind of moves you can make. Like, it's like, yeah.
For me, and this is where having that collection of data is key. Earlier on, we spoke about each phase being phase specific, and there'll be different phases merged between massing phases. So, how have they reacted previously before? Have they had sticking points on what calories, etc., etc., etc.? Now, if you're going through prep and you're a couple of weeks in, and then we see a sticking point there, first thing I'll do is I'll reverse engineer back to the data. We look at, well, what was sleep efficacy like? What was stress like? Where is, obviously, we're a female, where is she in her cycle? And so I'll look and I'll review all of these first. Now, obviously, as an athlete, we're looking at straight 10s across the week in terms of adherence. So we have to be sure that the adherence side of things is taken care of. If all of these check green, so, cycle's not at a point where progesterone is sky high and slowing down transient timing, we've got, clean adherence throughout the week, everything is being ticked off, stress is low, fatigue is okay. Well, then we'll start looking at, right, well, we need to pull down a little bit. Do that because everything is perishable. Every card that we play within this game is perishable. So I don't want to be increasing cardio, decreasing food, increasing lipolytic profile all at the same time. I will always just do one. So if it's a case that our training performance has decreased even or hasn't been moving where we want it to be at the start of prep, it should still be moving forward as far as I'm concerned. So at that point, if we've stopped seeing that, the visuals haven't really changed, or the weight hasn't really changed, and even pumps in the gym and having that subjective feedback is important, they've been diminished. But then I might look at, a manipulation from a PED perspective. I might tie in a small amount of extra cardio, might even just be less invasive, maybe it's just extra steps. So we say, right here, we take that data then until we see a drop. And then we've got the perishable card to use then as to our next caloric drop. Now, if it's the opposite of that, then and it's a case that like training performance has been fine, we're seeing relative fullness in the physique from a visual perspective, then it's just a case that we're going to have to dig harder with food. But we should have that, at that point, especially at that point in prep, we should have that card there to play that, right? Well, food will just nudge down again and won't be too much again. We might be looking at a slight little reduction, usually around 200 calories, and then let that sit and be patient. But being patient and being calm as a prep coach is just so important, and to be able to make your decisions without panic, without bias towards X, Y, and Z, and just being able to interpret the data, know your individual that's in front of you, and then be able to just tell them, look, just relax, this is what we're doing. You'll see what's going to happen, and then what happens is what you said is going to happen, and then their level of trust then, because that's important. Because even if you've been with you for a long period of time and their trust is already sky high for you, but for you to be able to calm them and prep when cortisol is naturally higher and be able to put them at ease, and what you said is going to happen happens. It's like next time this happens, Alan has it, Shane has it, etc. That's really. So that's sort of how I go reverse engineering back if there is an issue that we do need to solve.
Yeah, I remember hearing Cliff Wilson talk about this in the context of prep, saying that coaches are paid for making decisions. So you need to have conviction in the decisions that you make, because if you don't have conviction in the decisions that you're making, your athlete is going to be able to pick up on that. It's like a dog, right? A dog can know when you're excited, and then they get excited, right? So if a client feels as if you're unsure, that doesn't give them a lot of confidence, and that may affect just something as huge as adherence to that. Now, maybe they're not fully invested in kind of doing that extra cardio session or making that reduction in calories, or maybe they're questioning the process a little bit more, and then all of a sudden if that happens too early on in the prep, that could set the stage for the following few weeks.
Absolutely, having conviction in what you're doing and being able to just calmly say, this is what we're doing. This is why done. That changes everything, because that even from then is now, and this is what's happened.
Yeah.
So it's like proof again. It's because what can happen, and look, you've walked that walk as an athlete as well as a coach, that you can always feel as if, oh shit, I'm behind. And I really feel that there's two types of athletes. There's athletes that you need to spoon feed, and everything has to be, minded and reassured, etc. as to what they do. And then you've got athletes that you just need to protect against themselves because they're just like wanting to gun it. From the get-go, everything is more and more and more and more. Again, protecting them against themselves is important. And that's where just coaching really just comes into it. And being, as I said, and as you've said, just very, very clear and concise on your feedback and the next moves.
Yeah, the two archetypes there of different clients in regards to the person who not necessarily needs to be dragged along, but like, needs to be kind of sweet talked a little bit more into kind of doing the things, even though they know it's in their best interest to either make a reduction in calories or whatever the kind of change to the plan is. But then there's also the people who, it's just a case of they feel like they want to do more. It's like coach said 200 calories, I'm going to drop 300. If he said 10,000 steps, I'm doing 12. And like the way I try to frame it to clients with that is like with those clients, because they have a need for wanting to work hard. And for them, in that context, working hard is actually following the plan. It's not doing more. It's like hard work is to follow the plan, and to try to frame it like that and say, you know what, if you are doing a little bit extra, that's great, but that's not what we're trying to do here. And that quite often can work against people too, because it kind of removes something from the list of options that you do. As you said, like each change or each of the variables there is perishable, right? If you go down to 1,800 calories too quickly, we don't have the option anymore. Now we have to dig towards 1,600 or more. And, at a certain point, any of those changes can be fine. And then you make the next change, and that's where your kind of breaking point is, or where that's just a little bit too much for you. So it's a case of not emptying the magazine of the gun too early, and just like, again, getting as much progress as you can from like the least amount of changes. And if you do that, like off the back end of the prep, it actually makes the transition back to normality a lot easier, because the harder you push in one direction, the harder your body's going to push back eventually once that goal kind of goes.
It just manages fatigue.
Yeah. So I guess kind of coming into the kind of final few things here. So we talked a lot about like, troubleshooting the plan, kind of setting out the prep timeline. But I guess like now towards the end, we're going to be looking at, okay, this person's like nearly ready to get on stage. In regards to like trialing out different kind of peaks to kind of get them on stage, because I think if you do have the opportunity to trial a peak, it's probably a good idea because it removes a lot of variables coming into the show. There's a lot of different peaking methods you can use: front load, back load, like gradual load, linear load, whatever you want to call it. What do you find to be like the kind of more kind of tried and trusted methods, and what do you particularly like to kind of use first with clients before kind of maybe getting a little bit more complicated with things?
For me, the first go-to will be a front load, because it gives you time, and it gives you wiggle room, to be able to assess if there's been a spill, so on and so forth. Now, if we've trialed, because we're having a longer prep, if we've trialed the peak week, we sort of know this, and we talked about predictability being key here. But for me, I always like to go or edge a little bit more towards a front load, especially if a client is sort of a novice in terms of their competitive journey, disregarding how good they are or can be. A front load would be the first choice for me to go with a client, male or female.
Okay. What about the context of, I guess, like what potential kind of issues could you see kind of popping up using the front load, like if any? Or what kind of issues have you run into previously with them?
Well, like, look, if we sort of, if we look at the goal of peak week, right? So our goal of peak week from a visual perspective is to be full, hard, and dry. Mm-hmm. So, right, we understand that. And then we sort of have to be like, well, how do we get to a point in which we're full, hard, and dry? So what we need to look at, and rule number one, is you need to be skinned going into peak week, regardless of your category. I know that there's a lot that will say, well, you don't want to be skinned if you're a bikini, etc. You do, because you can manipulate it down with nutrition and fluid balance really easy. So then we want to look at our key variables. So our key variables for our peak week manipulation in that retrospect is going to be our carbohydrate intake. It's going to be our water. It's going to be our electrolyte balance. In particular, it's going to be sodium and potassium. It's going to be our training. It's going to be our CV. It's going to be our stress, our sleep, our steps, our PED load, and our lipolytics. Now, if we've got blood work done maybe 4 to 5 weeks out from the show, and like, look, ideally you'd probably go a little bit closer, but to get the buy-in for that is hard. So let's say 4 to 5 weeks out from the show, we will see anything that needs to be done in the retrospect of aromatization from our androgen back to estrogen. So then that's going to play a role then obviously in us moving forward in the retrospect to drug protocol moving into the week. And that sort of ties into what I said there around PED and then our lipolytic load. So once we understand then our key variables and really having a fundamental of an intelligence around physiological and feedback pathways, that now puts us in a position as to, right, well, what does our data say from the client? Knowing that, as I said, everything has to, and we want it to be predictable. So the safest route for us to use is a front load. Because bear in mind, if your individual is skinned, the work is almost done.
Yeah.
You know, I know you'd actually asked me a question before we went live here, Shane, and that was, you know, things that I probably, you know, done at the very start of my career that I don't do anymore. And that would have been an overcomplication of peak weeks. And that just creates stress then on the athlete because, you know, we don't want to be adding in all of these variants that haven't been done before. So for me now, it's really just taking a very subtle, predictable approach based off of data, interpretation, and visuals, and understanding, as I said, our physiological feedback pathways, as I just mentioned. So our biggest player, obviously, as you know, is going to be our carbohydrate. So with glycogen, you know, 1 gram glycogen now is 3 to 4 grams of water. So we need to make sure that, you know, and again, this is fucking drives me wild. Drives me wild is the thought process, and it's very old school thought process of, you know, just cutting. I've worked with a lot of combat athletes, etc., but this is bodybuilding, right? Cutting water too early. So the reduction of water too early is going to send a response back from our antidiuretic hormones, right? Particularly aldosterone. There's going to be reabsorption. But that's obviously fundamentally also controlled then from our sodium intake, so our potassium. So all of these things, if these are being manipulated and we're lowering sodium, or we're higher in sodium, lowering potassium, feeding in water, cutting water too early, we're going to have volatility for what? For the sake of what? Because if you've got an athlete that's brought in, you have an athlete that's brought in skinned at the start of the week, and you and them have been super happy with their look leading into the peak week. How many athletes, Shane, do you know that you might see their picture on showdown and be like, geez, they look so much better 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, it happens.
It's heartbreaking for the athlete, right? So for me, it's taken a real sort of data interpretation of our peak week and then sort of going with it from there. So as cutting water, because again, that just gives me the ick. So as cutting water too early happens, as I said, we get that reabsorption, but also then, you know, if we're looking at our glucose transporter, SGLT1, that's going to be, in order for SGLT1 to be able to transport in glucose, it's required, you know, sodium levels, it's required water. So by depleting that, we stop an intake and an uptake of our carbohydrate levels. So now we're in a position where you're eating all these carbs, but you're either using a diuretic or you have some strange water manipulation going on. And these carbs aren't sticking. The feedback that I'm always looking for from my athletes, the subjective feedback is, well, where is your hunger? Where is your pump? Where is your stress levels? So again, when I'm constantly asking these questions throughout this, if I'm feeding them full of carbohydrates, let's say it's a middleweight bodybuilder and it could be, say, 700 grams of carbs, 800 grams of carbs, and they're feeling nothing from it. Why? Okay, because there's been a mismanagement here. Now, this is a variable then that we've not done at any other point. So why would we do it now? So for me, I keep our sodium and I keep our water pretty linear. I don't mess around with it. I don't mess around with potassium. I look at, as I just said here, our physiological pathways, and I look at, right, well, what's our biggest player here? Is our carbohydrate. Do we need to have a mild depletion of carbohydrates? We're pretty depleted coming at the back end of prep, with our goal being fatigue to be cleared. So in a perfect situation, you've got that client ready. It really is just a case of not having to do that, and it's clearing fatigue. That's going to naturally reduce catecholamines in the blood, our cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Obviously, there's anxiety being built up in anticipation and excitement for the show. But if we front load then at the start of the week and they're getting food and they're high fluids, we see that the visual like really coming to where we want it to be, which again is overplayed by coaches sometimes because without a strategic coaching eye, it's difficult for the normal person to see. But you're looking at minute changes, then I'll be looking at, right, well, if Shane is sitting at 85 kilos, I'm very happy with this look. And this was after 400 grams of carbs here at 2 p.m. On a Tuesday morning. I'm taking that data down. Okay, now I get you to send me over information at 8 p.m. that night. Now you're zero point 0.7 or 0.8 of a kilo up. I feel like the look is a little bit faded. This is after, an excess of 250 grams of carbs after the last photos. I'm not happy with that. We go the next day, we see exactly the same visual at the same weight with the same amount of food. Perfect. We take that then, right? Well, we front loaded at the start of the week. We've washed it back down to maintenance. At that point, our outputs have been decreased. So that should be stored there. And then we're checking the weight. If we start to see that drop back down, we'll just tip things back up a little bit and hold that look. And what does that do then? That gives predictability. That then puts the athlete at ease, that we know and you know that this weight, with this amount of food, this is how the body is responding. And I love the look, you love the look. You can walk on stage then calm, only just focused on really enjoying and being in the moment and enjoying the experience and producing the look and the posing routine, etc. that you want. And that makes for an easier prep rather than going down the route of, let's say you're depleting for the first, start the first half of the week, and then you're excessively loading down. You might go a high, medium, wash out, or whatever it may be. Usually, like, the closer you are, obviously, with carb loading to the show, the harder it's going to be to pull things back if shit doesn't make sense. But there is a time and a place for that, and especially if you've got somebody that is, let's say, a super heavyweight, like an individual this year that he was on stage at excess of 120 kilos. So for me to front load him at the start of the week is not really applicable. So again, for me with him, I will backload him, and what we'll be doing is during the backload is that we'll be obviously making sure that our hydration is on point, that everything there is on point, and then we might look at a mild diuretic protocol then to pull down purely down to muscle mass and obviously excess amount of food. But even with that, we have to look at the window from potential stage time, noting that every fucking show, as much as I love bodybuilding, it runs late, and where was our peak carbohydrate loading, and where is this window, so that we're not flattening out too much. Because again, flatness is 99% of the time, lack of fluid. So yes, there's definitely obviously an inter-individual response, and that should always be the case for anything within physique development. But these are the sort of objective markers that I go through when I'm looking at a peak. Having that, I'll always give, obviously come into peak week, I'll always give a template as to what we're doing based off of the data, but it'll be clearly explained that a peak is highly dynamic. So it's based off the visuals. If I just tell you on a Sunday, Shane, right, this is your peak week, bud, I'll see you at your show next Sunday, it's not great, right? No. So everything has to be orchestrated based off of observation and obviously previous data, so that's predictable, and thus the look is landing.
Yeah, it's a time where you have to be very, like, you have to invest a lot of your time into, like, that particular athlete. And then if you have many different athletes as well competing at the same time, like, it's one of those kind of times where you're gonna be quite time poor.
Like for muscle contests now, they're in 7.5 weeks. I have 20 athletes competing that day.
Stress.
Busy day, and there's 8 the week before, and there's 9 the week after. So you've got people that are bridging between shows. You've got obviously peak weeks for people only doing the muscle contest. You've got then peak weeks for the individuals that aren't doing muscle contest, are just doing the regional. So that's not like a full peak into the regional, and it's going the week after. So there's always, a controlled chaos. So staying calm is so important, and a skill that I feel is invaluable for coaching at any high level, not just in bodybuilding, be it if you're a combat athletes, powerlifters, whatever your niche is, your ability to be able to stay calm, I just feel is super important. And how I do it is basically, I just think of things as segments in the day as to what I need to do. If I think too far ahead, I get overwhelmed. So I literally look at, I've got this to do here this morning. I need to see X athlete, especially, when I'm at a show with them, and then I'll programming, right, well, then I'll do my own check-ins, X, and I'll do my own check-ins. And that's sort of how I go about them weekends. And no definitely a lot more definitely.
Yeah, I think though, like something you mentioned at the start of when you were talking about peaking when you're handling that level of clients is really important. Where you said, you don't overcomplicate peaks anymore. You just kind of keep them simple, right? Because like naturally, if you're working with just one person who's competing, you can get over the top complicated, even if it's not necessary, and it's not necessarily going to improve the results or anything like that. But when you have all these different variables that you're looking to manage, and then you have all these variables for lots of different people, it's very easy to get like mixed up. And what happens then is you end up making a bad decision, or you just have made so many decisions that you end up making poor decisions. And I think that's
Decision.
yeah,
That's what I see is that your brain is so frazzled. There's this, like obviously you've heard my object coach and you're not being attentive enough to see something that could potentially be going wrong before it actually goes wrong. You don't make that decision then, and then that client gives you feedback 3-4 hours later, maybe the next morning, and things have gone backward. So it's that's where knowing your athlete, knowing physiology, and understanding the data, and not overcomplicating things, because we spoke about it earlier on, sharing about individual coaches wanting to be the cheerleader at the front, and taking the limelight away. And generally speaking, they want to paint a picture as to, I've got this super peaking protocol. I do X, Y, and Z. The best peaks are based off of the interpretation of data, keeping your athlete at ease, having your athlete ready, and just edging things forward, and really just attention to detail. They're the best peaks, but that's not as sexy to put on Instagram or TikTok or whatever reel. But that's the truth, and that's how high-level coaches replicate peak after peak after peak. Your athlete is in such a volatile state in terms of just like from a mental perspective, the anxiety, the excitement, they know they're ready, but they also know that their peers, their family, etc., all are waiting for them to come on stage, and they get tied into, well, who am I competing against? Especially those that have big goals. This girl is coming, or this lad is coming, and this is who I'm going to be against. And all of these things, we just have to get away from our athletes and just have them focus on themselves. So really just managing that side of things in the peak and leading into the peak is it has a much more efficacious effect on developing the look that you want than any of this pseudoscience.
Yeah, big time. Like the nerves of just coming into that week when the goal is pretty much going to be kind of realized towards the end of the week. That's enough. Never mind throwing in lots of different variables, and just from my experience of when I was doing my shows, I guess I found more stressful because I was making changes that week than anything else. So like for me, it was really, really important for me to like minimal changes, because I was already nervous enough and already doubtful enough. And you're thinking about like, how is this going to look like tomorrow? Or am I going to look spilled? Am I going to look flat? All this kind of stuff that's running through your head. And naturally, naturally, like the more kind of things you're playing with, like that's only going to heighten it. So I'm glad that like the coach I was working with at the time, he just like kept things very, very simple for me. It just made it easy for me to adhere.
It's so nice then that you've been able to walk through that experience, understand it from, the athlete perspective as to the anxiety of around changes and this, that, and the other, but then having a coach there that kept you at ease, that explained the changes, that didn't overcomplicate things, and plus produce the look that you wanted.
Yeah.
And that can just be continuously replicated. That's the fine art of coaching as far as I'm concerned. I could come on here and I could talk about, serum levels of potassium and having all of these really sort of intricate thought process and stuff to sound intelligent. And the truth of the matter is that's not coaching. That's coaching your ego. It's not coaching your athletes.
Yeah, we're not here to fucking do biochemistry. Like, and look, let's be real. I'd say about 90% of us who are in the industry don't have a fucking clue when it comes to that level of like, of stuff that goes on within the body, or even remotely qualified.
You have a PhD in of itself of one little rabbit hole that you can go down.
Yeah.
That's something I always remind myself as, because researching is a big part of my day. It controls my anxiety, truth be told, and keeps me sort of on track. So that's like a fundamental aspect for me is day-to-day research. And then one thing that I always remind myself of is that no matter how intelligent I think I am on a certain topic, there is a niche part in this topic that someone spent their whole
Yeah.
life only researching, so you don't know shit about that.
Yeah.
So you know enough to be able to do as your niche job needs, and that's as far as that goes. And to be able to sort of step away from the ego side of things, I feel is really important.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with kind of upskilling with coaching over time is we can read everything that we want, but it's learning how to actually use that certain piece of information in the right context. That's where like the real kind of like art of it comes in, because it's very common when people read about a new topic and then that's all they see. That's like it becomes their explanation for everything. Like often not the case. There's a lot of Dunning Kruger that happens there. um, all right, Alan. Thank you very much for your time. I know I've kept you a little bit longer than we anticipated
Okay.
here, but I kind of wanted to just get you to talk a little bit about the muscle contest that's coming up, because I know that
Yeah,
you're sponsoring that show, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we have the muscle contest coming up in May in the RDS. So obviously we have that weekend. It's going to be the biggest weekend that we've seen in Irish bodybuilding, because we have for the first time the NPC Naturals, which is going to be on a Friday. Then we have the regionals, which is going to be on a Saturday morning, which is that's my side of things. So that's where I've become the title of sponsor to ensure that Ireland is now regionally required, which was a hell of a task, Shane, in and of itself. So thankfully we're in a position that that's after we've got that over the line. So now we've got the regionals, and then that will feed into the pro qualifier, and which is muscle contest pro qualifier. And then, as with many European shows, because the pro show this year is classic physique, with many European shows, what will happen is that there's the pro qualifier, there'll be the break, but within the break is where you have the pro show, and then it's back into the finals of the pro qualifier. So it's a mega weekend for Irish bodybuilding, and it's now finally a pathway forward, because bodybuilding in Ireland was thriving at one point. We had like the two other federations. We had RIBBF, we had NAVA, and whatever way we want to think about them, and whether you have positive bias or negative bias towards them, we had two main shows at that given time. There was a lot of pride around them shows within the Irish community of bodybuilding. Over the last 5, 6 years, obviously NAB has been gone since COVID. RBBF has, and I'm not here to slay anybody, I'm just literally speaking factual. RBBF has dismantled and close to going now. If not, I don't even know if they're doing the show this year, but that's been sort of watered out. And that split with the IFBB has, with the Pro Elite side, is sort of dead in the water anyway. Now we've got PCA, who are doing a great job. They've got their shows in Derry, and they've got a show in Galway, and they're doing a lot for bodybuilding in the UK and in Ireland. So we've seen like an emergence of that, which is almost like the new, for me, it's like the new NAB and the new RBBF. And people will probably be angry at me for saying that, but that's created a want and a sort of a fight for pride as to who's the sort of best. And it's just nice to see that. But then obviously, look, the cream of the crop is the NPC, right? From, all athletes that want to succeed, or from a coaching sphere, if you want to be regarded as an authoritative figure within Ireland, within the UK, across Europe, etc., you need to be producing results within the NPC and on that circuit. So now that Brian and Tamar have brought this here to Ireland, I know it's been here a few years, but we've seen a real development this year, along with myself coming in on it, etc., to really just push this over the line and make sure that Irish bodybuilding is moving forward. That's super important to me, because Irish bodybuilding has given me everything. It's developed me. It's built my gym. It's built my brand. So for me, it was just being able to give a little back towards Irish bodybuilding, future competitors, seasoned competitors. Now we have a regional, but it's more than a regional. It's your home nationals. Yeah. So there's going to be pride in that. And then obviously you have the added benefit then as you qualified through that scheme then to do the pro qualifiers and go abroad, etc. But why not fight in your home turf first, and have that? Like, we see it in the naturals, like all the time. They do it so well. We've got like NBFI, we've got WNBF, etc. I wanted that then here in Ireland, and Brian and Tamer have done a great job on pairing that together. So it's going to be a mega weekend, which then leads into another weekend in September, which is going to be in Limerick, which I'm also the sponsor and running the regional show there as well. And just to make sure that we are now fully regionally qualified, because what happened was, I'm sure you've probably seen it, Shane, that the Muscle Contest had released that we were doing a regional, but there was backlash over not having two regionals, and some people lost their absolute shit over it. They're trying to blame me on it, where I'm just investing in the Irish bodybuilding. But it's funny because the same people that complained about it weren't willing to put the money where their mouth is and actually invest in it. So Muscle Contest came back to me. They asked me what I want to do, so that's why I reinvested again in September, so we could tick that box. And now, we are, and we will be going forward regionally required Ireland. So, very excited for the weekend. It's just going to be good for bodybuilding in Ireland, good for our community, good for the rapport, and long may it last.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, my Emma is competing at that. It's going to be her wellness debut, so I'm looking forward to being there.
Yeah, I was talking to her. She looks very good.
Yeah, she's starting to look the part. Is your Ava doing it as well?
She is, yeah.
Okay, cool stuff.
She has Sweden the week before. She's won in Sweden the week before. So the goal for her now is to get this card as quickly as possible. And so she lost in a split decision in the overall in Sweden last year. So we're hoping to go back there, but you never know, because there's other athletes that are doing the same. So we have a season laid out, and the expectations are high. And yeah, she'll be there. And I don't know about you, but I absolutely... So for me, I spent an hour talking about being calm, right? The minute when I'm backstage with Eva, and this could be a podcast in itself, is the coaching your fiance, but when I'm backstage with Eva and I can be AKA, I can be Alan, the coach, I'm fine, right? I'm like, this is what we need to do. Here, give me a look, pose, perfect, boom. And when she goes back into the holding area before going back out on stage.
Nervous wreck.
Oh man. I don't even sit beside anybody. My head just explodes.
Yeah. I feel
so that. I peek at the curtains. I don't even look. I just be peeking at the curtains like, oh God. But yeah, this year will be an exciting year for us. So exciting year for the team. We have Shane Cullen as well, trying to get his Olympia qualifications.
Yeah. Where's his first show of the year?
Muscle Contest.
Oh, it's Muscle Contest too. Yeah. Okay, Daddy.
Yeah, so he's straight into the pro show, looking to get that qualification for the Olympia. Again, obviously a very hard battle to do, completely different doing it in the IFBB pro ranks than doing it in the amateurs. So if all goes to plan, he gets that. Well, then it is a merger, then sort of a clearance phase, a break, and then it's set sights at the Olympia. But first, we don't want to look too far ahead at all. First, we have to put on a show here in Ireland, given that he's an Irish athlete.
Yeah, it's probably it's a long time coming for Shane. Like, he's been probably one of the first Irish bodybuilders I kind of knew of that was like, he actually looks like a bodybuilder.
Yeah, he certainly does. So he's probably one of the... I don't know if you've ever seen him in person, or at least lately in person. Yeah, you're going to be blown away.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, he has the kind of just the roundness, big muscle bellies, perfect insertions. Yeah,
it's a crazy look, and he's super calm now. So it's just like he's looking forward to putting on a show, and obviously, he's a phenomenal poser. So that side of his business then is individuals, competitors, etc. are going to witness him posing, and that help him tremendously then as well with business side of things and exposure. I really want that from him, because Shane's a really shy individual, and he gets a lot of hype from bodybuilding stations and stuff. Yeah. He's a really reserved individual, just a good dude, but he's so good at fucking posing.
Yeah, so I remember seeing his Arnold routine. Is Arnold UK, and that was sick.
This one is cool for Muscle Contest. I won't give too much away, but it's cool.
Yeah, we'll have to wait to see it. But Alan, look, I really, really appreciate all your time today, and I'm sure anybody who's listening to this is going to get a ton of value, whether they are a coach or an athlete. I guess just to finish off, do you want to tell people where they can find you? I'm sure they can probably guess by now, but anyway.
So if you go onto Instagram, Alan_the AK method, and that's it. That's where you find me. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on X. And not on Facebook. So it's literally just Instagram or our website, akamethod.com.
Awesome. I'll have all of your links in the description. And yeah, if you did enjoy the podcast, do go over and follow Alan. And obviously, if you did enjoy this particular episode, leave a rating and review on the podcast platform you're listening on. Give it a share on your Instagram stories, and we will catch you in the next one.